Golly, would you look at that amazing view? Wonderhussy here, hanging out in the beautiful, mysterious, and remote desert side of the Eastern Sierra. Okay, the Eastern Sierra, you probably think of the Sierra Mountains covered in snow, Yosemite, Mammoth, all those beautiful places. Well, you can see the snow-capped Sierra poking up above the ridgeline here in front of me. I'm over here on the desert side of the valley. Yesterday, I drove all the way to the end of that road that stretches like a ribbon through that beautiful, desolate valley. Well, I drove almost all the way to the end of that road and then turned around and came back. And yeah, it was a lot of driving, but oh my God, it was beautiful. And then I camped over here at elevation. Even though it looks like I'm in a desert, I'm at like 7,000 feet. And that's the neat thing about the Eastern Sierra. If you're in this area, you have it all, man. You got the snow-capped high Sierra with all those aspen trees and little wildflowers. And then you've got the valley floor, which is probably about 90 degrees right now. And then you can come up the other side to the desert mountains. And, well, if you keep going, you'll reach Death Valley and have all the hot desert you want. Or, like me, you can stay up top in the desert mountains and spend a very peaceful night camping on our wonderful public lands. Okay, this is National Forest Service land, and what an amazing place to camp it was. But now, sadly, it's time for me to roll on. In fact, it's almost time for me to head on home to the real desert on the way other side of Death Valley. But before I go back to the desert, I do have a couple more days to spend up here in the beautiful Eastern Sierra. And since I'm going back to the desert, well, I want to make the most of those 2 days and head back over to the Sierra side of the valley and check out just a few items of curiosity I've had pinned on my map for quite some time. So let's get in the car and go for a ride and see what kind of fun we can have and what kind of beautiful places we can find. Okay, believe it or not, this isn't one of the interesting places I wanted to check out, but it is right in the middle of where I'm going. It's a huge radio observatory. Look at this, Caltech, Owens Valley Radio Observatory. It says authorized personnel only, but then it says self-guided tour, and the gate's wide open. Let's see if there's, oh yeah, there's papers in here. What does it say? Oh, look at that. If you're doing a self-guided tour, then you can ignore the authorized personnel sign. We have 3 rules. Pictures or videos for commercial purposes require a permit from Caltech. You're not allowed to go in the telescopes, and you got to email this person and let them know when you're going to be there. Dr. Mark Hodges from the Owens Valley Radio Observatory in Big Pine. Oh my gosh, this actually looks super interesting, but I'm kind of in a quandary because technically I am shooting footage for commercial purposes since there's ads on these YouTube videos. So I wouldn't feel good about myself if I went in here and filmed this without getting, what was his name, Dr. Hodges, permission first. So Dr. Hodges, if you happen to be watching this video, I'll be back, but for now, I'm just gonna put the brochure back in the box and continue driving to my intended destination. But before I leave, well, it didn't say I can't film from outside the gate. And I just read in that brochure that I think that telescope there is one of the biggest in the world. It's 130 feet across, and I guess it's on tracks, so it can be moved nearer to or farther away from all these other radio telescopes. There's a whole bunch of them in this field out here, which makes sense because there is close to 0 light pollution out here in this valley. And I should know, I camped right over there last night. It was beautiful dark skies. Great place for a radio observatory. I guess this was just a prototype and they intended to build, I think, 7 more of those giant telescopes. But unfortunately, federal government decided to fund the VLA, that's the Very Large Array, in New Mexico instead. And if you've been watching my channel for a while, well, you might remember that I have been to the VLA, and it is very awesome. Anyway, we're just gonna have to enjoy the view from a distance for now, but yes, I will be back to do this self-guided tour at some point in the future. All of that was just a bonus anyway. It just happens to be right near this other thing I want to go check out. Oh my god. This place actually looks 1,000 times cooler than I expected it to be. It's basically a big, well, warm spring swimming hole that one of my friends told me about. And I have to be careful because there's people swimming in it and they're playing copyrighted music. Anyway, one of my friends told me about this awesome warm spring that you can camp at. The only downside is he said it was full of leeches and crawdads, neither of which sounds very appetizing to me, but I don't know, it's not stopping these other people from swimming. There's like a rope swing over there that they're jumping into the water off of. I don't see any leeches or crawdads. Golly, I feel like a real perv lurking here in the bushes filming this. I guess because that's kinda what I am. No, hold on a minute, I'm not a perv, I'm a hot spring hunter. Crikey, it's another warm spring in the middle of the desert. Okay, apologies for the bad Australian accent. Okay, well anyway, the water is relatively warm. I'd guess it's probably about 75, 80 degrees, maybe even 85. So it would be very pleasant on a hot day like today. I think it's like 93 degrees out here. Even though, yes, these snow-capped mountains are towering in the background, it's hot down here. Remember, one side of this valley is the high Sierra, the other side is the desert. So yeah, it's hot, and it sure would be nice to go for a float in a warm spring. I just don't feel like dealing with loud music or drunk guys, let alone leeches or crawdads. Fortunately, I just got another hot tip the other day about another warm spring swimming hole in the area, and I didn't hear anything about leeches or crawdads at that one. Okay, I'm at my next destination, and obviously it's much better suited for my taking a dip. And interestingly, this location is right across the valley from the other swimming hole. You can probably see in the distance there, I'll zoom in, there's those radio telescopes. But over here on this side of the valley, there's another swimming hole. Actually, there's a whole bunch of other swimming holes. And I've actually been here before. I think it was last summer I made a video called Asswater Springs. And I named it that because it was a series of hot springs at the side of, or part of, I guess, a little warm creek that flows through this valley from a hot springs resort. So it's basically the overflow water from the hot springs resort. You're basically soaking in water that other people have already soaked in, which is why I called it ass water. Anyway, if you watched that video, you might remember that the only thing I didn't like about those hot springs, or that I found slightly unsettling, is that those power lines there run right over top of them. And so there was this kind of creepy, buzzing, humming sound while you were soaking in the hot springs, trying to relax. I certainly didn't think it was so bad that it ruined my experience. I actually really, really like Asswater Springs, and I will definitely be back there. Essentially, I basically am back there. I'm just a little bit farther east. I think I'm right along old US 395. I mean, you can probably see in the distance the new US 395 is, oh, I don't know, a mile or two that way. But this right here that we came in on, I think somebody told me this was the old US 395 back in the good old days when it was just a little 2-lane blacktop. And so nobody uses this old US 395 anymore, unless they're trying to get you this swimming hole. And I actually think there's more than one. The first one I stopped at didn't look quite as nice. And I know you're probably thinking, well, golly, does this one look any better? There's a big swastika greeting you upon arrival. Well, I'm not a fan of the swastika, even though I think that's a backward swastika, so that's not a Hitler thing. Maybe that's like a ancient symbol of life. But it's covering a sign warning you about Naegleria fowleri, which is that exceedingly rare but deadly amoeba that lives in water above a certain temperature. And if it enters your nose, it can eat your brain and you'll be dead within a week. These signs are a real buzzkill, but they have them posted all over this area because there's a bunch of warm springs. And sadly, a young boy died, I think in like 2008, and his parents sued the LADWP, which is the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. They're the folks who manage all of these lands, and incidentally, they're also the folks responsible for why this is such a desert valley. Okay, we're here at the foot of the mighty Sierra. There should be all kinds of snowmelt running down here, irrigating these fields. There should be lush crops growing and cows grazing. And there still is some of that, but there's not nearly as much as there used to be because Los Angeles very famously sucked this valley dry about 100 years ago. And if you've been out to the former Owens Lake, which is now pretty dry, well, you know what I'm talking about. The Owens River runs right through this valley, and it is dammed and siphoned and litigated within an inch of its life. And so prior to all of that, well, this valley probably didn't look so much like a desert. Which, I don't know, all of that was before my time, so I'm only familiar with the Owens Valley looking like it does today. And I think it's absolutely beautiful just the way it is. But I'm sure there's plenty of long-time residents here, people who grew up here over the generations, that are pretty upset with the LADWP. And so I guess that's why somebody drew a swastika on the sign. Either that, or they're just tired of being warned about Naegleria fowleri because it is exceedingly rare. I mean, it's tragic that that boy died, but you know, almost all the cases of people who do contract that amoeba and die from it are young boys, because guess what? Young boys are the types who are diving and splashing and getting water up their nose. You know, people like me who just sit there keister in a floaty and drink a ranch water. Well, we don't have anything to worry about, and so we don't want to see a bunch of buzzkill signs like that. Oh, look, here's the welcoming committee. There's a bunch of little fish in this beautiful pond awaiting my arrival. And as many fish as I see, I don't see nary a crawdad nor a leech. So I'm gonna go ahead and get in. Ooh, I'd guess this warm spring is at least 90 degrees. It feels really good even on a hot day like today, and it'll be perfect with a nice cold ranch water. Cheers. Okay. As much as I hate to get out of this beautiful little warm spring, well, I'm out of ranch water, and they don't allow overnight camping here anyway. And it is getting a little late. I mean, this is summer, so it's not going to be dark for another 3 hours. But I do need to find a place to camp. And before I do that, well, I have one or two more places I want to check out. And the next one I'm super excited about. Unlike the disgusting amount of litter at this warm spring, which I am very much not excited about. Look at that. Somebody took a dump and then just put a pack of baby wipes and a rock on top of it. Oh, and you people are afraid of Naegleria fowleri? I think there's probably more E. coli at these places than anything. Anyway, I'm a big proponent of picking up other people's trash, but I draw the line at other people's poop. I am not down with OPP, at least not in that respect. But I will pick up this empty beer can. Ugh, gross. I freaking hate beer. I hate the way it smells. But as a stewardess of the environment, I feel it's my duty to at least take this can with me and dispose of it properly. At least that way, I'll feel like I really earned the treat I'm about to go get. Okay, I'm at a place called June Lake, which is absolutely beautiful. And I can't believe I've never been here before, but I didn't come here to look at the lake. I came here to go to this June Lake brewery. Now, why would somebody like me who hates beer go to a brewery? Well, I got a hot tip just the other day from somebody who told me they have amazing carne asada fries here. This must be the place. Let's see. Oh yeah. Okay, I just paid for my food. I gotta wait for them to make it. I guess this taco truck is called La Paria. And golly, I mean, the picture these people sent me of their asada fries here the other day looked amazing. In fact, they looked as good as the ones that I love up in Bridgeport. We'll see. Meanwhile, everyone's just hanging out here at the brewery, having a fine time, drinking beers, listening to music, and little do they know, the best thing up here is right over there. Ooh, my alarm's going off. Oh, let's see. Oh, yeah. Okay, I'm actually not going to eat these yet because I have one more place I want to go before it gets dark. But I got to at least take one bite. Okay, well, unfortunately, as much as I'd love to just beast on these fries right this second, I'm running out of daylight and I still need to find a place to camp. And there was one more place I wanted to check out, but oh my god, I gotta have at least one more bite of these fries. I'll be honest, just from that first bite I had, I can already tell you they're not as good as the ones at the barn in Bridgeport. But they're pretty good. Okay, what I don't like about them as much as the ones in Bridgeport is there's no guacamole, no avocado, and there's like, I guess it's like Thousand Island or some kind of mayo-based dressing on them. And I'm really not a fan of anything mayonnaise-based. In fact, well, I don't even call it mayonnaise. I call it the devil's jism. But you know what? These fries and the other things they put on them are so good. I don't even really mind. It's like the best jizz I've ever had. I also like how there's black beans on them. I don't think they put beans on them at the barn. So that's one advantage point for the June Lake Brewery food truck. La Paria. Whatever you want to call it. Anyway, I better get going. I'll save these for later. Okie dokie. We're here at a place called Crowley Lake, or Crowley Lake, I'm not sure how you pronounce it. It's named after the desert padre, Father Frank Crowley, I think was his name. He was a Catholic priest from Los Angeles who did a lot of work in this area. I guess he was a great help to the people of this valley as the valley was being sucked dry by Los Angeles. The farmers, the ranchers were really getting demoralized. And apparently Father Crowley was a great comfort to them and convinced them that they could still succeed in the area of tourism. Okay, so even though they weren't able to farm anymore and ranch and their water was all drying up, well, I guess he gave them hope that they could still make a buck with tourism. And boy howdy, have they ever done that. I mean, if you've ever been to this area, well, you've seen for yourself how much tourism there is here. That's pretty much probably the biggest industry. Although, ironically, I think the LADWP, that's the Department of Water and Power, is the biggest employer in this area. And they're also the ones responsible for creating this Crowley Lake. It's actually a reservoir that was created by damming the Owens River. How about that? The once mighty Owens River that flowed mightily through this valley and made it all nice and green and beautiful. That is unfortunately not the case anymore. Okay, well, it did create this amazing lake or reservoir, and what I'm headed to is a very specific geologic feature. And oh my god, it's amazing. I can see it from here. They're called columns, Lake Crowley columns, and apparently they are best viewed in the late afternoon light, which is why, even though the sun is going down fast, I wanted to come out here and take a look at them. It just sucks because you're not allowed to camp out here. It's all private property owned by the LADWP, and they don't allow overnight camping. So I find myself in the position of wanting to be here late in the day, but then also having to haul ass out of here and find a place to camp nearby before it gets dark. Oh my gosh! This is one of those rare instances of something being even cooler in person than it looks online. Wow, I'm not kidding. I have seen pictures of this and people have been sending me pictures of it for a long time saying, oh, hey, Wonderhussy, you ought to go check that out. Well, I didn't think it was going to be cool enough to warrant an entire video of its own, which is why I kind of tacked it onto this Eastern Sierra grab bag. But to be honest, I feel like this is totally cool enough to be a video all its own. Even though I don't have very much time, I mean, golly, look at these formations. They're absolutely surreal. I mean, you can see they go all the way along the edge of the lake. Light's not very good that way. You can see they're on this side too. And apparently they're only on this side, the eastern shore of this lake. Fascinating. Wow, it's basically like, well, I don't know if you're allowed to touch them. It doesn't say not to. I'll be gentle. They're basically sort of like mud pillars, and it looks like all the years of water lapping on the shore has sort of worn away these cool alcoves and sections between them. Or at least I guess that was the theory, that these things were created by water erosion. Look at that. Look at the pillars over here. This is so wild. They're like, this looks like human remains of some ancient civilization. It looks like a bunch of chimneys rising up like from an Anasazi cliff dwelling or something, right? I just think it's absolutely surreal and beautiful. You can see that the erosion, I guess, is more pronounced down here where the water's closer, and then up here, farther from the edge of the lake, there's not as much, there's not as many archways and little like caves. You know, up here, they're just kind of like nubs, or actually they look like rock cairns. These look like man-made, you know, like those piles of rocks that you see when you're hiking in the forest, and like people stack up rocks to indicate the way the trail goes. I know a lot of people are very anti-rock cairn these days. I personally am a fan, and I guess now it's actually trendy to knock over rock cairns because it's a sign of man in the wilderness. They shouldn't be here. So if you see a rock cairn, you're supposed to knock it over. Well, not so fast, buddy. These aren't rock cairns. These are naturally occurring pillars, or columns, I guess is what they call them. The mystery columns of Crowley Lake. I'll go over to this side because the light's a little bit better here. They're not backlit, and we can kind of, well, I guess we could walk out and get closer to them. Apparently, from what I read online, you're supposed to wear water shoes to do this because apparently, whoa, this water is cold, A, and B, I guess there's a lot of pumice on the bottom, so you don't want to go barefoot. But yeah, you can walk right up close and personal to these columns. Look, these are absolutely, this looks like something in friggin' Venice, Italy, you know? Like some man-made pillars of some Venetian palazzo. And then, of course, the rising waters of the Adriatic Sea. Isn't that what it is in Venice? Flooding somebody's house. Oh gosh, don't listen to me. I didn't even wear a bikini. I didn't realize I was gonna be wading in the water. It's not that deep, and honestly, it's actually not that cold. I think this lake is only 100 feet deep, but it's like 1,000 square miles, so it's relatively shallow and thus, I guess, relatively warm. But I don't want to get my pants wet because I am camping tonight, so I'll just pull them up. Look at this. We gotta walk into these columns, y'all. Let's go inside. Dun, dun, dun! Going inside the mysterious Lake Crowley columns. Weaving amongst the Lake Crowley columns. Oh man, this is one of those times when I wish I wasn't so short. I am definitely gonna get wet chonies. Well, problem solved. Or like I always say, no pants, no problem. I went ahead and just threw them there on the bank because there's nobody here anyway. Figure I can, well, as they say, shirt cock my way over here without offending anybody. Okay, so now I don't have to worry about getting my pants wet. I don't have to worry about getting my chonies wet. I can weave and wander between these columns to my heart's content. Look how cool this is. Like maybe I should zoom out. Would that be a better effect for you guys? Look how neat this is. And we can just wander, weave amongst them and pretend like we're like a mermaid in a little mermaid sea monkey castle or something like that. Wow, this is so cool. And the water is so clear. I mean, it's that beautiful crystal clear Owens River. I guess it's fed by all these different streams in the Sierra Mountains. Beautiful sunset going down over Crowley Lake. And then more columns on the other side. Absolutely beautiful. So yeah, I mean, the evident answer as to how these things were created would be that it's just the force of the waves lapping against the shore over all these years since the formation of this lake. Which, this lake isn't that old. I don't know exactly what year they dammed this, but LA didn't start sucking the water out of this valley until the 1920s, so the lake can't be older than 100 years. So could that actually be enough time to create that kind of erosion? Oh my god, they just look so amazing. Well, except for my pants and chonies sitting there. Well, I guess I can go ahead and get dressed now. I mean, there's no point in wandering around in the water when I'm about to go camping in the forest and freeze my tuchus off. I might as well dry off now. Anyway, yeah, you would think it was just water lapping at the shore that caused these formations. But you'd be wrong. Okay, I guess some geologists came out here and studied these formations relatively recently, and they figured out that it actually was nothing to do with the water lapping at the shore at all. It's even more interesting. It has something to do with, I guess, the shores of this lake, or at least the eastern shore, is made up of volcanic ash, okay? If you've ever been up here to this part of the country, we're sitting on top of a giant caldera. There's been a lot of volcanic activity in this area over the millennia, and I guess at one point there was this huge volcanic explosion or eruption, and layers and layers and layers of hot volcanic ash settled on the shore of what's now Crowley Lake. But remember, we are up in the high Sierra, so they do get a lot of snow. And so I guess when the snow melted and that icy cold water trickled down into that ash, which I guess was still relatively warm. I don't know what kind of a time frame this happened in, but apparently the ice cold snow melt trickling down into the hot volcanic ash formed these weird columns. Or I guess the snow melt itself didn't create the columns, but it created these little holes or chambers in the ash that I guess water trickled into over the years and formed rock of a much higher mineral content that was much harder than the surrounding ash. And so what we're seeing now are these columns of that hardened mineral material in these chambers that were formed by that cold water dripping down into the volcanic ash. Does that make sense? The volcanic ash, I guess, is the soft part that's being worn away, but these columns were formed by long drizzles of snow melt, basically eating into the ash and then being filled with some kind of much harder material. Okay, man, I would have loved to have done more research on this so I could explain it better, and also to have spent more time here, but golly, the sun just went down on the other side of the lake, and so the beautiful light on the columns is gone anyway. And that means I'd better haul ass back up to the top of this ridge and get out of here. It was a real bumpy road, and I mean real bumpy. A lot of people just park and hike out here, but you know, I got a 4Runner, so I drove out here, but the road was super duper bumpy, and I don't want to be navigating that even in the dusk. And also, I still have to find a place to camp. And it's a real bummer they don't let you camp here, because this little cove would be an absolutely amazing campsite. This wasn't that far off the highway. Yeah, it was a rough road, but even if you have to park and walk I think it's only about a 2-mile hike. And if you do have an off-road vehicle and park where I did, well, all you have to do is scramble down this little path and you're there. Ugh. Okay, maybe I'm making it sound a little bit easier than it is, because it is steep. Ugh. I'll just say I really earned those Asada fries now.